Most gaming gear is a waste of money, so I asked over 1,000 gamers what their most underrated purchase was, and I went through every answer myself. Most of them were boring, but a few cheap things kept showing up again and again. So in this video I'm going to show you all of them, starting with the cheapest one, and I'm talking about mouse skates. Now those are the little things on the bottom of your mouse, and most people never touch them. You just run with whatever came in a box and never think about it again. Now to be honest, I always thought this was like the sweaty nerd stuff, like only the tryhards bother peeling off their skates to put new ones on. But somewhere along the way I tried a set. And now to be honest, I got like 10 boxes of dot skates from every brand you can think of. Because once you feel it, you can't really go back. And if you're on a glass pad, this isn't even optional. The stock skates on most mice sound and feel just like awful on glass. And they scratch almost instantly. A proper set fixes that on day one. But just know that they wear down faster on glass, so you'll swap them every few weeks. But one last thing before you buy, how they feel depends a lot on your pad. So it's less about grabbing the most expensive ones and more about matching them to what you've already got. But good skates only matter if the surface under them is right, which of course is the mousepad. And this showed up a lot in the answers. Now, curious enough, most people just want bigger. One of those XL pads that take most of your desk. And a lot of them say the same thing, basically that they couldn't believe how much nicer it felt than a normal pad, because they had like more room for big flicks, your whole arm on one surface instead of like half of the desk, and it just feels cleaner overall. Now back when I used an XL pad, I actually kept it under my main mousepad and keyboard. Not to game on it, just because it was like softer on my wrist when you're sitting there for like hours. Now for the mouse itself, I always had like a separate pad on top, usually like an artisan or like a glass pad. And glass is the one I want to push back on a little, because the internet talks about it like it's a cheat code. In the response is like a bunch of people say something in the lines of once you try it you can't really go back. And yeah, it's fast, really consistent, but it's not the upgrade everyone makes it out to be. It's super loud, especially when you catch like dust particles on it. It feels hard and cold under your hand, and for some people it's almost too slick, so you actually lose control instead of gaining it. And yeah, you also need like a gaming sleeve. Now for myself, I love it, but I never tell someone it's automatically better than a good cloth pad. It's just like super different. Don't buy it because the internet hyped it, buy it if the speed is the thing you're missing, and especially if you play like heavy tracking games. And another thing to not get fooled by though, like a giant printed desk mat is not the same as a real gaming pad. Those big aesthetics ones look like super cool, but they're soft, so your mouse kind of sinks in and the glide gets like heavy and uneven. It looks super good for like an aesthetic gaming setup, bad for aim though. But a clean mouse on a good pad only gets you so far, because there's something sitting above all of these that decides how the whole setup feels. And that thing is the monitor stand. And the fix that kept coming up was the monitor arm. Now most people think they need like a bigger desk, they don't. Their monitor stand is just hitting like half of that space. Those stock stands have like these wide feet that just take up a bunch of room, and the monitor sits in one fixed spot whether you like it or not. Now a monitor arm clamps to the back edge, the whole base disappears, and you get all of that space back. Then of course you can push the screen back, pull it forward, tilt it, raise it, whatever you want. Now this sounds like minor until you actually use one, and then your desk kind of feels twice as big for like 30 bucks. Of course there's one thing you have to check first though, because this is where a lot of people mess up. A lot of cheap desks aren't like solid inside. They're basically like thin board with a cardboard honeycomb in the middle, basically like the version of American houses. They hold weight fine when it's spread out, but the monitor arm puts all that pressure on one tiny clamp point. So on a cheap desk, that clamp can actually crush the surface or punch straight through it. Now the fix is super easy though, you just like get a flat metal or wood plate under the clamp to spread the force and you're fine. And that's everything you see and touch sorted. The mouse, the pad, the screen. But the next one isn't about any of that. It's about what you hear, and this is where gamers waste the most money. So the audio answer that kept coming up wasn't the headset at all, it was the IM. Basically those in-ear monitors that seal inside your ear. A bunch of people basically say the same thing. Once you get like a pair of 25 bucks IMs, everything sounds completely wrong. One guy got a pair of 25 bucks and said the sound quality was honestly too good for the price. And the first time you actually play with a decent pair, it kind of clicks instantly. Footsteps sit in a clear spot, so you can then basically if someone is below you, behind you, off to the side, without that muddy wall of bass a gaming headset throws at you. Now a lot of people also pair them with a DAC, which is like the little adapter that turns the digital audio from your PC into the signal your IMs actually play. And there's like two reasons people brought up that combo makes sense. The cable on most IMs is pretty short, so it doesn't really reach your PC comfortably, and a DAC sits on your desk as a middleman and gives you the length. It also cleans up the sound because your PC has noisy electronics inside, so you lose the hissing and get more details. Of course IMs aren't like magical, you get that pinpoint surgical placement of sound, but you give up the big wide soundstage you'd get from like open over-ear headphones. So for movies or just like sitting back with music, over-ear still feel nicer. For hearing exactly where someone is in a game, IMs just win like 10 out of 10 times. And this is basically the whole thing with IMs. A $25 pair will do 99% of the job, so you don't really need to waste a lot of money here. And speaking of cheap stuff most people sleep on, there's a couple more worth grouping together before we get to the winner. First is the arm sleeve. I used to think these were like pure esport stuff, like guys watching one pro player wear a sleeve and buying it just to feel like more competitive. But a few people pointed out the actual reason, and it's annoyingly simple. In summer or anytime your room gets humid, your forearm sticks to the pad, especially if you have like a glass pad. And a cheap sleeve will just remove the whole randomness and inconsistency. And I also know like a bunch of people say that they can't wear this because they look cringe. Like my brother, you're alone in your room playing a game, no one cares how you look. And if you even care that much, maybe you just like have other problems in your life that you're too insecure about, so fix those first maybe. Second one is the mouse bungee. It's just like super useful to have, especially if you still use like a wired mouse. And speaking of cables, this brings me to the next item on the list. And I'm talking about cable management. Once you get like a mouse, keyboard, monitor, a DAC, maybe even like a mic, you've got like 6 cables hanging off the back of your desk in a tangled mess. A little tray that mounts under the desk takes like 10 minutes and the whole thing disappears. So that's the full list from the survey, but before I tell you the one thing that got picked the most, here are my personal favorite things that are outside of this list. First for me is height adjustable desk with cable management built into the frame. For me, I use the Secretlab Magnus Pro, and this generally is my favorite thing in my whole setup. You dial the height exactly right for your arms, and when the desk goes up and down, the cables go with it. So there is like zero mess underneath. This was basically one of the biggest changes that I did in my setup in the last year. And the last one that isn't even on the survey is a key light. And this is that little panel light people use for filming, but I keep one on my desk just for like the lighting space. And this is super cool because I can also adjust the temperature and it feels like I'm outside. And it makes the whole setup feel way more put together. But the one thing that ties all of this together and the one thing that got picked the most in this survey is the monitor arm. That's the one thing I tell everyone to get first. It's cheap, instantly makes your desk feel twice as big, and once you actually use it, you can never really go back to like a normal stand. So over 1,000 answers, that's basically how it went. Almost nobody named the expensive stuff. The expensive gear lost to a $10 set of skates and a $30 arm. So I'm actually curious, what's the cheap thing you defend to death? Or the expensive thing you regret? Drop it in the comments, and if you want to see the gear that genuinely feels like cheating, check out the next video.